So I guess when you were growing up, what was the attitudes towards like mental health at school and at home? Like, did people speak about it openly, or was it more of a kind of just get on with it attitude, and it was only that conversation was only kind of reserved for quite severe circumstances?
Right. So I think growing up, I think I'm lucky to have like a family which is comfortable with talking about a lot of this stuff, especially like my mother. We have relatives who like struggle, like close relatives who struggle with mental health and with like diagnosed with like depression and things back in the 70s, you know. So at a time where like it wasn't that common.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of knowledge about this stuff in my family. So I think growing up, I know my mother was always super open about some of this stuff. And school, I think, was a bit different. I did go to school which is very like it's very well ranked always. They have a lot of resources, but I do remember that it wasn't really taken that seriously.
Yeah.
Back in school.
In what way do you mean?
Like, so I think we had like counselors in
Yeah.
school, but it was sort of looked down on to go for counseling, you know. So that wasn't very good, and I think that does shape a lot of people's like mentalities towards this sort of thing where going for help to talk about some of this stuff is seen as like a bad thing.
Yeah. So I guess even though it wasn't explicit, I think a lot of the attitudes were like implicit, and
Right.
I get the whole point is that it wasn't spoken about. So that's again kind of shining stigma on it.
Yeah,
itself.
yeah. No, definitely. I think it wasn't spoken about enough. Like, I think more than anything, people didn't really know that it was okay to go like have some of these conversations. It wasn't really like our school focused on like academics. That was it, and it was like I think in some ways it was like academics at all costs.
Yeah.
So like good academics at all costs, I guess. So like mental health was seen as like not really that important. Maybe it's changed now, but when I was there, it definitely wasn't really something which was prioritized.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I didn't have the best time in school, and coming out like and speaking to people years later, I realized that so many others didn't. And
Is that because of the pressure? Or?
yeah, it was a mixture of the pressure, just like I think the school wasn't really like they didn't really care about the experience of what people were going through at the time.
Yeah.
Just like if you're doing well, like if you're getting good grades, that's enough.
Yeah.
You know?
Ruthless.
So yeah. So I guess like other people echoed sort of what my experiences were. And I think like that did sort of shape how I felt about these things, at least early on, because I think school for me was an environment where I couldn't really express how I felt because that would be seen as like a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the case. Like if I went to a school which had counselors and had a lot of like people who were like really privileged in so many ways, had access to resources, and still I had to like, you know, that is my experience. I'm sure it's the case in other places as well.
Even like having it as a subject, like you have physical health, but they don't have like emotional or mental health. So
no, they didn't. They had like, I mean, I remember they had occasionally like a couple of times like counselors would come in and say like, yeah, like if you're going through something, you can talk about this stuff. But I don't think it was really taken that seriously, honestly. And it wasn't really, I think it wasn't really normalized to ask for help.
It wasn't.
I don't think so, no. Because like I remember how some people would go meet the counselor, and you know, I think I mentioned this, but they were sort of like people would judge them a little bit for that. Yeah.
What would they judge them about, do you think?
I'm not sure. I don't remember, but it was just like, oh, like look, going for counseling, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess in some sense, like the school should have been a little more like private about some of these things, you know.
Yeah.
Said you can like come to us without letting anyone else know.
Yeah. So is it the case that actually, if you did go, there was people would find out through
people know somehow, yeah.
So it had that stigma attached to it that actually it's quite a big thing to go there.
Yeah.
And was it a mixed school or a
It
boys'
was,
school?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was. So I did like 10 years, like till the 10th grade, at one school. That was a mixed school. Like it was co-ed. There were like 36 people in class, and then I did my 11th and 12th grade at a different place. That was a very different experience. It was like 96 boys in one class.
Wow.
A lot more diverse. The school I went to, there was very little diversity in terms of like income status, but also in terms of like religion and stuff. The school I went to later was like extremely diverse in both like income status as well as like religion, stuff like that.
And was that in 11th and 12th grade? Are you kind of 16, 17 at that
yeah.
point? Okay.
I started when I was like 11th, I think I was 16.
Yeah.
And so I spent like 16, 17, 18.
Okay. So your sort of 7 to 16 was your school, which was mixed and
yes,
not very diverse.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
And the 11th and 12th grade place, I think I don't remember them really speaking about mental health much. That was just like it was a place known for like discipline. So the teachers were really strict, and they kind of had to be because like they're dealing with 96 boys a class.
Yeah.
Like, if they weren't super like strict and aggressive, then people would like act up.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of like behavioral stuff to manage day to day.
Yeah. So I don't even remember like if there were like talks on mental health or anything like that. I don't think it was like really considered a thing. Yeah.
And because you said that at home your mum was really open with you, and because I think that is quite an open thing to actually tell you what depression is, because I didn't really know what depression was growing up. Like, it felt like a cluster of symptoms, and then it was only later that you understand what that is as a language. Because I think when you're younger, like people throw that term. So it's really good that she spoke to you about that, and because you knew a bit about it from that side of things, and maybe you'd seen someone go through that. Did that change how you felt about school and like how you would, like I guess what you noticed at school maybe, like because you kind of maybe a bit more aware of the symptoms. So there's pollen in the air.
Yeah. Spring.
Or like more open to talk about it with like your like people at school.
Yeah, I don't know. I think school for me was just like a very different experience from a lot of the others I've had. Just because like I think I was I didn't really change much beyond that point, but like it wasn't a good environment to talk about any of this stuff.
Okay.
Like at least for me.
Yeah.
And I think like while my mother spoke to me about a lot of this stuff, it wasn't really things which I mean, one, she spoke to me about it like in my teens, not when I was like growing up, and I think but I don't think those are conversations I could have had like in school. It wasn't really the place where that sort of thing happened.
And it feels, I guess, school is such a routine, so you can kind of get stuck in the way that things, like the status quo of how things are run, and especially if you said it's all geared towards academics as well.
Yeah. So and I think at least for me when I was growing up, I thought that's just how the way things are. You know, like I didn't realize that I wasn't having the best time in school because I just thought like that is everyone's experience.
Yeah.
And it like just I don't think I really opened up about how I was feeling at the time, just because I mean, one, I didn't realize that I wasn't having a good time, but the other thing was like I feel like that is a place where that would have been seen as like some sort of weakness, you know. So it wasn't a very good place for like,
that's really difficult, and also school is such a turbulent time, especially if you throw that many kids in. There's so much going on, whether that's like family and, like you said, academic pressure, and that's, I guess, the fact that, you know, the schools which have like, you know, push for the biggest grades are often the ones where they compensate that for mental health, because they just work people really hard, and then that's when it can feel like people just wait until crisis point, because there's almost no option at that stage. Whereas before it feels like, you know, the kind of analogy of like a duck swimming and then like their feet are like going underwater. It's like everything's okay on the surface, but underneath things are kind of a bit chaotic.
One thing I was grateful for in like 11th and 12th grade though is that like I made friends who were a lot more open with talking about this sort of thing. Like where I learned a lot more, you know, at the time. Healthier friendships for sure.
Yeah. So that was when you're 16.
16, yeah. Like I made friends who were first off very open with expressing their emotions and also very open to listen.
Yeah. So, and when you say like expressing emotions, what does that kind of look like?
It could just be as simple as saying like, I'm not having a very good time, or like, you know, like things are rough, I'm feeling sad about this, you know. And that was something which used to not happen that much in school. And I know it's something which a lot of people, at least I know a lot of people, especially men, who struggle with doing that even now. You know, like just being able to say at the time that they're going through something.
Yeah.
So a lot of the friends I made at that time were super encouraging about having those conversations. So it was a different environment, and I sort of learned that it was okay to do that.
Yeah.
You know, with friends.
For sure, and it kind of shows that like the role modeling, like not even from someone who's senior, like someone who's your age, like doing that because of whatever reason is like so important. Because like you said, it can be very like daily, like regular check-ins. It doesn't have to be a big thing every single time, but I think that's almost more important, is like just like checking in, like doing a bit of an MOT every now and again rather than kind of suppressing everything.
No, I agree, and I think, I mean, this isn't specifically about upbringing because like after like 17 till now, a lot of the friends I've made, like the male friends I've made, are a lot more open to like do that, you know, like checking in, talking about when they're not feeling good, more like emotionally, like expressive emotionally, which is, I think, a lot healthier, because I am friends with a lot of people who don't do that. You know? And it's, I think a lot of people, like a lot of men, think that it's, like I'll power through this and like I don't want to talk about it, and then you know, but sometimes you need to. So so roughly like 16, 17 is when I realized like I had friends who were better with us.
So did those friends for you make you more open with them? And like, I guess, are there still people where you feel a bit more closed and you still feel like there are certain taboo topics, or just, I guess like less open?
I think so. I think there are like, I think I am a lot more comfortable with like a few people, and there are still like some people I met who, if I'm going through something, I know I can like reach out to them, rather than just like tell whoever it is I'm with. So like for the topics part, I'm not too sure. I think like I know if I'm speaking to someone and they're opening up about something, I'm happy to talk about like anything. But I think for me, it really depends on who I'm speaking to.
And I guess that's interesting because like there's a risk of the person who's opening up to like trust that person, that they are going to listen. And I think most people would, but sometimes reactions aren't helpful. Sometimes they're more helpful and encouraging. Like, I guess if you ask questions or share, I don't know. I guess ask questions, listen, and can empathize, then that can feel like a safer space. And that's kind of like spoken a lot about nowadays, isn't it? It's like feeling safe. Do you, I guess, what for you helps you to feel safe with the people that you are close to, who you open up with, rather than just like, you know, being close with them?
I think it's like the more meaningful conversations I have with the person, the closer I get. For me, I think I feel a lot more comfortable opening up to someone if they open up as well. I guess it shouldn't be like that, but because like sometimes I guess I should be the one opening up first. But at the same time, I think that's just how I function. Like I mean, like just giving you the example of like coming to uni and, you know, starting off there, I think the people I've gotten closest to are the ones who I've had more meaningful conversations with, and the ones who were like more open about what they were feeling.
Yeah.
So, and that's still happening. I think I have friends who I've gotten a lot closer to recently because, for instance, they mentioned that they had similar experiences as I did when they first joined. And I feel like all of us almost were a little felt a little unsure. It's like these completely new people. Like you don't have like you're everyone's trying to make friends. Everyone's trying to like, you know,
Yeah. I feel like quite fast paced as
yeah.
well.
So what we didn't really speak about initially. I mean, I spoke about this with like a few of my really close friends, but we didn't speak about this stuff as a group. And I mean, why would we? Because like it's a new place, it's new people. But then recently I found out that a lot of people felt unsure and like a lot of people felt nervous around people and wondered if they'd make friends. And
Yeah.
just hearing that from some people made me feel a lot closer to them because I think in some sense that's a shared experience.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And it's the like vulnerability does bring people together.
Yeah, I think so.
It does have that like the lack of judgment is
For sure.
the best breeding ground because then you can be yourself and then that's the base of a good friend relationship.
Yeah. So when I was like in the 7th or 8th grade or something, I read about like ADD, and I sort of realized that I had like a lot of the symptoms of ADD, and I brought this up with like my like my parents, and then my parents were like, yeah, okay, look, we can see. I think my mom was a bit skeptical. She was like, I don't know if you have this. But then we went and spoke to like my principal, and my principal at the time just said something along the lines of, if you had this, you'd be failing classes, and you don't have ADD or ADHD because like you wouldn't be in the school and you wouldn't be able to like keep up with the like academics and stuff like that. And I just thought, okay, I guess that's it.
Okay.
But then, like years later, I met people who are incredibly accomplished, who have done incredibly well, in uni and like in school, everything, and they got like diagnosed with ADD and like ADHD. Sometimes very late in their lives, like sometimes in their early 20s or like mid 20s even. And I guess that's something which made me think. I was like, okay, I don't think. I mean, if a school principal is saying that, like, yeah, like, you can't have this because you do well in school.
Yeah.
It sort of shows a lack of understanding,
Absolutely,
I guess.
Yeah. And almost the kind of othering the fact that if you have a mental health condition, they're essentially saying, well, then you can't do well, so you don't want to have this almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
But kind of like you said, ignorance as well, and lack of understanding.
Yeah. And if like honestly, I think that sort of thing exists in India in general. Like, I'm sure it exists everywhere with like the older generations, but like it's especially bad in India because I spoke to a few friends who like told me similar experiences, and I think right before like I left for uni, I was like, I have the time and now I have the resources to do some of these things on my own.
Yeah.
So I set up time with like a I think it was I think it was like a psychiatrist. And I spoke to him, and like I basically brought some of the stuff up, and I told him about like why like I thought about some of these things and why I thought there's a chance I could have it.
And how long did you wait to actually get a diagnosis before then kind of mentioning it at school?
No, I mean, in school it was more like I brought it up, and I was told, like you don't have this because, like you aren't failing your classes, and then like I said okay, and then I had later on, I think this was as late as like 2022 or something, 2023, and that time I was like, okay, like I have the time and the resources to do this. Let me just speak to someone and like see like what they say. And it is like this old man who was like, yeah, like you have a good job, you have like you have a good job, you have obviously done well in like your undergrad. um it's not possible, like
Wow.
you don't have this, like if you did you would have like known early on.
But it still feels like it's the similar thing to
Yeah.
a principle is like using your academic qualifications
Exactly.
as like a status, and to
Pretty
say, well,
much.
that doesn't correlate with having ADHD. You can't
Yeah.
have it at the same time.
Yeah. And like my friends who have been diagnosed with it, like they are just a lot of them were like exceptional like in their academics, and like some of them, like one of them went to like probably the best university in the country because he'd done so well in like his exams.
Yeah.
Some of the others are just like some of the sharpest people I've met, and they just like learn really quickly, do really well, grades are always good. Were always good. So I don't know, it just made me think that like, yeah, like I don't, it made me wonder why. Like,
And also that was his job.
Yeah.
Like his job is to help people like make sense of the diagnosis, and I guess what's interesting is that in India you have to pay to have treatment, right? Whereas in England you don't. And I was speaking to someone who's from Mumbai, and they were saying that they created an app about mental health in English, and I was like curious as to why is it all in English, and she said like most people who access services are like speak English, and it kind of suggested to me that means that people who do access services probably have higher education anyway.
Yeah.
So what is this person like? What are they saying to everyone that comes through their door? Are they kind of dismissing it, or they're kind of it's a weird. It's not their job to say, oh, you've got a good education, so that means you can't have it. It's their job to like diagnose what they kind of see. So yeah, I don't know. It seems quite confusing.
Yeah, it was very
confusing.
Reaching
out
for
help.
Yeah, it was pretty confusing. I dropped it there, and I was like, you know what? I think like I'm not gonna really pursue this anymore.
Yeah.
But it wasn't very nice to hear as just it sort of felt like a repeat of what happened in school.
Yeah.
And like after that happened in school, I was like, yeah, like if the principal is saying this, then she probably like doesn't, like she doesn't really care that much about some of these things.
Yeah. How did that make you feel at the time then?
I think, I mean, I don't quite remember, but I think I wasn't really happy with just the way it was treated, like it was dealt with. But there wasn't much I could do. I said, okay, yeah, like I think I'm just going to drop this now. So it was, I guess, like a bit of frustration for sure. Yeah.
Can I ask a bit about the symptoms?
Yeah. I mean, I think like one thing was just constantly being distracted, being unable to like focus, but also like it was something as simple as like I remember is like eye contact or something, like being unable to like do that for like long periods of time. Like fidgeting a lot, and it for me when I read about some of these things, I was like, yeah, like my grandfather had to like give me like something to fidget with when I was sitting still, because like I'd be watching TV and then he'd give me something and say like, don't play with the remote, like do this, and stuff like that. So I was just like, a lot of that stuff when I was reading through it, it made sense to me. And I was like, okay, no harm in like asking about some of this stuff.
And I guess people reach out for help because it's impacting them in some way. So I mean, what's your kind of relationship with the symptoms now?
I mean, like I still am distracted incredibly easily, and like all of that stuff is still there. I think I have gotten a little better at like regulating and like like, trying to get better with like if I need to like, I think a lot of this came up because I was finding it really difficult to study. And I have found tricks to help with some of these things, like maybe not tricks, but just things which work a little better. So yeah, not something I'm really keen on pursuing anymore.
Okay.
But
So I was going to say, like, are you just coping on your own now, rather than like, would you still consider pursuing that here, or?
I thought about it, and I brought it up with my university's
Oh yeah.
like counseling service, and they basically said it would take like 6 to 8 months or something like that, and I was like, you know what, I don't know if like I want to wait for 6 to 8 months and then like have a weird outcome,
Yeah.
a weird outcome,
Especially if you've had your experiences, like two people have dismissed it and not taken it seriously, or kind of using your academics against you almost. But,
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
But it's tricky because I'm like, a lot of people who wait for the diagnosis have kind of been waiting their whole lives for a diagnosis, and it can be different it's different for different people. For some people, they do get it, it's a bit of a relief, or you'd hope here that they take you seriously and they treat it more objectively. They don't kind of look at. I don't think you'd ask what someone's level of education is anyway, so you probably wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tricky to have been constantly been told, kind of been gone down different paths.
I agree. I think it isn't the best to like just hear that. And like I think academics don't always tell the story about things,
Yeah. For a student, postgrad student, in London, a bit different. What is the difference in terms of how education providers talk about mental health and just any kind of stress really that's going on?
I mean, I think we like at uni, we get emails constantly about like, okay, like these are the services you have access to, these are the pathways you have if like you're going through something, if you want to talk to someone, this is what you have at your disposal. I think our first like week, the professors like in charge of the program like had this discussion about mental health, and they brought up their own experiences, and like it was nice to see. Like I think like when I saw that, I was like, this is nice. They don't have to do this, but they're doing it. None of that, like I don't think a professor in undergrad ever mentioned mental health. Like not the professors. We did have a counselor who's very nice, and she did have sessions with us, like group sessions about like, this is when you can come to me, this is why you should come to me, and like I'm always there. So but to have professors talking about it is a different experience for sure.
Because then it's a bit more integrated as well. It's not seen like, okay, if I have a mental health issue, I need to go to a counsellor. It's actually just bring it into the daily language of people, having more of the kind of, I guess less stigmatizing, normalizing conversations.
I agree. I think that definitely helped. Plus in general, I think the uni just does provide a lot of like resources, and it's like, I think what's good is like the resources are organized well. Like you sort of, if you honestly you put in like 5 minutes of work, you can just find out every resource you have at your disposal and go from there. So that's helpful, and that's not something which I was used to.
The fact though that you have to reach out to someone though, are there still barriers in itself for doing that?
There are some barriers. Like I think it is complicated to get an appointment if you want to talk to a counselor. Like I know that it takes time. It like if you do want to speak to a counselor, I think this is more of like a demand supply problem. Like I think there's so many people who want counseling, but there are so few counselors. It takes like, I think it takes a good like month or two just to get on like the list of like not just to get an appointment, I think. And I think you're entitled to like 6 per semester or per year, something like that. But it's mainly like, I think there are supply issues, like
that's the other thing, isn't it? Like having people who want to access help and talk to someone, but then them knowing that it's quite short and it'll have to wait as well, I imagine puts people off.
It definitely does,
Yeah.
So yeah, there are barriers, but I think the barriers aren't like intentional.
That's a lot about where the problems lie as well. It's when people wait until crisis and then they're like, shit, I don't want to wait 6 months because I'm going to kill myself. Whereas it should be the case that it's given a lot earlier in kind of more manageable doses.
No, I think so. I think like that is a big problem. It's like when people need help, sometimes they need it like very quickly, and even like it doesn't have to be immediate in some cases, but it can just be okay. We'll get back to you like in a couple of days, like or in a day. But like to be told, like our next appointment's like 2-3 months, then that's definitely not the nicest thing to hear.
Like, what would be your definition of like toxic masculinity?
I mean, I don't think I have a definition. I think it's like traits and characteristics, but I think, I mean, again, I don't think I have a definition, but it's more like I can think of behavior which would come under toxic masculinity. Like a part of it is like, trying to suppress all emotions other than anger, like trying to be like stoic and, just. But the other thing is like how some people are like, like it means this to be a man. A part of it is like, just, and a lot of the connotations of that are bad. Like, like it means this to be a man, so like you have to be the provider and like this and the negative parts of, like what people think it is. Toxic masculinity is a massive problem. And it is definitely really bad. It is very bad in India.
Is it?
It's really bad. Like historically there's been a lot of like in some ways like male figures get more prominence. I think in some communities like being like, I mean, like I've heard people talk about how like they think that like being a Brahmin male is the absolute best you can get.
Because you bring caste into it as well.
They bring so that comes up as well. But it's never like it's both caste and gender, right? Because like Brahmin and male, that's seen as like the peak of what a person can become after like I don't know. So
and how does that affect people? Like if you are on that end of the spectrum, how do you think that affects? How do you think it affects something like that?
It's complicated because I think like for some people they want to feel an element of pride just by being born a certain way, but for a lot of other people they're like like we're actually the ones who don't get reservations in like government jobs or like in standardized exams, and we also don't get preferential treatment in like getting promotions because like so there's a sense of resentment from a lot of people who are born into those like, paths as well, and I think there's a lot of missing of context of why some of these things are in place, like why reservations are in place, or why women are getting promoted a lot more these days. It's like nuanced like conversations don't happen around these
it is
things.
all very nuanced, isn't it?
Very
because it's a lot about the patriarchy as well.
No, for sure. And I think in India specifically, like it's kind of sad how a lot of online figures are like they sort of talk about these like masculine values and what it means to be a man. Like I think Andrew Taylor is pretty big in India.
Really?
Yeah. And I think a part of it is a lack of like healthy masculine like role models. They're there, but like they're not marketed enough. Andrew Tate markets himself, like gets people to market him
in a very aggressive way.
In a very aggressive way.
Yeah.
But I think there aren't enough like healthy masculine role models who are being brought up the same way as like Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. That's when like people gravitate towards him. It's like men, like especially like boys, want to feel special and want to like belong. There aren't enough conversations happening like between like male friends about this sort of thing. Like there isn't enough like openness, in my opinion. I'm very, very fortunate to have a lot of male friends who are extremely comfortable with their masculinity, very open emotionally, very supportive emotionally, like, and to the point where like they're able to express affection like with other male friends in ways
Yeah.
which you wouldn't see in a lot of male friend groups.
Yeah. In like
So-
in what kind of ways?
Like, I mean, it's as simple as like I have a friend who every time we meet, he hugs me for like 10, 15 seconds, you know?
Yeah.
And like we tell each other that, you know, like we're very close. We tell each other that we love each other. You know?
Yeah.
And that's rare. I don't think that happens like in every friend group. And I've heard like, I know about like how some other like groups I'm not in have dealt with like difficult times. Like I know about this like a I wouldn't even call him an acquaintance, but like a friend of a friend who broke up with like a long-term girlfriend, like someone who he'd been with for like 8 years because his family was like, no, you can't get married to her. And his other friends were like, they weren't very supportive. He's like, I want to talk about this, and like, it's sad. And they were like I think one of them said like, hoes will be hoes or something like that. And another one was like, yeah, like let's get you drunk and we'll find another one. Like
Which sounds like an example of toxic masculinity.
exactly an
Even
example.
if it's not intended to be that way.
It 100% is. I think.
Like even if it's intended to be banter, because I often think that is a bit of a mask for toxic masculinity, is like just banter, just male banter.
Yeah, and I don't think this was like banter. This was like genuinely him this guy bringing something up, and the other friends not really knowing what to do and saying that, you know, which is ridiculous. Yeah. And when I heard about this, I was kind of stunned. I was like if a friend told me that after a breakup, I wouldn't want to be friends with that person again.
Very different reaction to like you said, giving someone a hug and like telling them you're there for them and that you love them. Very, very different.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I think in a lot of art, like I can see like if I run into like this friend and like if I was with, you know, like I was in Bangalore and we just like he hugged me for 10 minutes and then we spoke about how we loved each other. I think people would be like look at us oddly and like, you know, be a little like there'd be like some judgment. But it goes beyond that. I think like I have friends who like check in and who would like to be checked in on. Like I know they do. And I think that is a rare thing in male friend groups. Like just like asking someone if they're okay. That doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
And
beyond the kind of meeting and then just saying how are you kind of thing.
For sure. And like even if like okay, so one part of it is like for me, one part of it is like reaching out and like checking in. Other part is for the other person to say, I'm not doing too good.
Yeah, volunteering it.
So
as well.
both things happening is rare in like male friend groups. And I think that does contribute a bit like to toxic masculinity because like, or maybe it's a consequence of it because people are less open like to talk about these things. And it does like it does get like worse in mental health, I think.
Yeah,
where,
exactly.
Like if you keep some of these things inside for like too long without talking about it, then it's not great.
Because you were mentioning about role models, and it feels like a lot of your friends are almost role models for like the group.
Yeah.
Because they're modeling healthy masculinity in a way that's actually really like you experience it and it's really nice.
Yeah.
And really like valuable. Have any specific role models which have kind of modeled healthy masculinity?
Yeah, I think like my like for me, like it's very personal, but like my grandfather, because he's a very patient man, and he was very like patient with everyone, but he was also very like he was someone I think I aspire to be, because like he is very understanding, you know, and compassionate and stuff like that, which isn't like you can't imagine like Andrew Tate being understanding and compassionate. Right? Those aren't like masculine traits, probably, according to like a lot of men. So yeah, I think like he was like he was supportive and helpful and understanding, and like he had a lot of traits which like were which I really respect, you know, and I really hope I am like in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah. There's a Reddit post asking about like about like who are good role models for men. Like I think the first one was like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Oh really?
Yeah,
I've not seen Lord of the Rings, sadly. I've only seen Harry Potter.
Yeah, but I thought about it, and like there was this long justification. It kind of made sense, you know, about how like like he's a strong man and like he led an army, but he was also understanding.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's more of a justification.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny that you have to, it's funny that you have to think about like Aragorn. For an example.
Someone fictional. I know you said you're really lucky that you've got some really amazing like role models as friends, male friends. But does it ever feel different speaking to women about emotions compared to your male friends?
Yes. I remember like years ago, a friend of mine, like a female friend of mine, sent me like this article on how like men are a lot more willing to talk about emotions and like stuff like that to women.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and I guess in some ways it does feel a lot easier. Like I think it feels like there's less judgment. You don't need to behave a certain way, like more understanding. And I mean, I think I've gotten close enough to my male friends where like I think they are still some of the first people I reach out to. But I think it is easier initially, at least, to speak to like women about like things which are emotional, and yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah. And I think that's the case with a lot of men as well. I don't think it's just like something I've felt.
Yeah.
I know some men who like they when they're with like when they have a partner, they like speak to the partner about how they're feeling, but don't really speak to like other people. You know, so when they don't have a partner, like who they speak to, you know. I don't think it's like, in some ways I guess it's not fair, because then like in families, then the women are always going to receive like the emotional burden in some sense. And even like in friend groups which have like a few women.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because you said that you've got great male friends as well, but it still feels like there's something different initially, like you said.
Initially, yeah.
Females.
Yeah, like my I think one of my best friends at uni now is like she's the person I speak to like the most at uni, and I think we've hit a point where like we are very open to talk like at any point. Like I think that is one of my best friendships right now, because we're both very supportive. And I don't think I opened up to her because she's a girl, but maybe in some level helped. I don't know. Just to think about it a little, like I think we talk a lot. I have another friend who I think I'm very, very close to, who's male, and he randomly tells me like things like, I was in a terrible place last month, and I'm like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, oh, I should have, I'm sorry, but I didn't know how to do it. So that is a bit of a difference, like
that's interesting as well, because I guess your reaction is like, well, actually, you should have told me. Like, because that can make a difference as well, is like how the other person reacts to that information.
For sure, yeah. Like I want to know when my friends aren't doing too well.
Yeah.
And I know he would as well. Like, he's very happy to listen, but he isn't happy enough to like volunteer.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I think that can be a really difficult part.
Yeah.
I found, and because I guess thinking about your kind of recent friendships and relationships and things, is there certain aspects of that relationship which makes you more likely to open up? So,
I think a part of it is just like, at least for me, I guess if I was talking to you and you said something first, you know, that sort of like, you know, showing that level of vulnerability would make it a bit easier, I think. I think that's honestly the main thing, at least for me. I'm sure for other people, like, different things work.
yeah,
I think for some people, it's just a matter of like not saying much and letting them do all the talking,
yeah,
and seeing what they say.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, it's like the other person being the first to, like, you know, volunteer something.
but then I guess who's the other person going to be? Like, how do they? What would help them to open up and be the first one to make a move? Because what would make the initiator more likely to kind of open up?
Like, for the initiator to, I guess
Someone's got to go first.
Yeah, I think I mean, I guess a way to do it is to start with something small, you know, something which the initiator is fine with, like, saying, but which sort of starts the flow of the conversation. You know, it doesn't have to be something like super major.
Yeah.
But like something small. I think.
Yeah. And then you said being a good listener is important.
I think so. Yeah.
Have there then been times where you felt like you did want to speak about something but then didn't because it didn't feel like kind of safe territory?
Yes. Yeah. Like, I think sometimes I know when to, like, not say things to friends because I know they won't respond too well.
Okay.
And a part of it is listening. Like, I've had conversations with people and I'm trying to say something and like I get interrupted and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna like not really say this anymore. Usually it's interruptions in the form of like, have you tried this or have you done this? And
yeah.
Yeah.
A kind of how a conversation can often be set in pace.
Yeah, for sure. And other times I think there's some things which, like, I guess people wouldn't want to, like, I you know, like, I would tell certain friends certain things, but I wouldn't tell another friend the same thing. And I also am not a fan of like dumping everything on one friend, you know, because it gets a bit much. Like, I've been on the other side of like one of those friendships, and it wasn't like, after a point it wasn't very good for me. So yeah, still try to deal with things on my own a lot more. And I know I have friends who are supportive and who like would want to know more, but I think that's just who I am. Like, even in class, if I have a question, I try to figure out the answer to the question like for 5 minutes before asking, you know. That's just me. But I have like good friends in the program who I talk to about like program related things, but also like things about like London, because we're all in similar spaces. We've all moved here, and most of us have moved here, and like we're all going through similar challenges. I think there are things which like I would reach out to like my other friends from back home about. Like, especially if it's more contextual to like what has happened when I was there.
Yeah.
I am trying to open up more to like more friends and like the friends who like I'm like my friends, I think, in general, because I think sometimes like what's difficult is when you open up and then you feel like you've done something wrong, so you apologize, and the friends are like, why are you apologizing?
Yeah.
You know, like, but
is that something that you would do? They still apologize, or
I still do that.
Is that for what's that for?
Yeah, I think for the burden. Sometimes it's random, like, you know, like if I like if it's a nice day and I'm like not feeling good and I'm something going on, then I'm like, I'm sorry I had to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the response I think from all my friends is usually like, why are you sorry? Like,
Yeah.
we're friends, I want to know about this stuff, which is a good sign that they're good friends.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's very different when you're on the other side of it and someone's
For sure.
opening up to you, and it's way more easier to say to know that you shouldn't ever apologize for doing that.
Yeah.
You can see why people do it, because I think it's quite common, but it's weird when you're not the person who's
Right.
opening up or sharing, when you're the friend who's going to be there. So
Yeah.
is there anything that you would be interested in asking other men about?
Yeah, I guess like sometimes I think especially like just how it would be nice to hear about how other men like deal with like mental health in general. Like I guess how they regulate, how like what kind of conversations they have in their friend groups. So
Yeah. So everyone has complete different experiences,
For sure,
attitudes, and everyone's different. But then, from what I've learned from having these conversations, is that we're still all kind of similar.
Yeah.
Like, even though there's nuance, everyone still wants a similar thing. Like, there's still trust and openness and no judgment are the kind of main ingredients, whatever background or age or you're from. So I think that's quite interesting, because we can all come up with diverse experiences, but actually it's the ingredients are kind of similar. So
yeah.
sure. So I'll keep asking other men.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah. No, thank you.